You guys want to come up here?
Hi, I'm Egypt.
Hey, Egypt.
Hey everyone, I'm Spencer. I'm Brendan.
And together, we are the Metasploit Townhall!
Yeah. So, there's our contacts on GitHub and on Twitter. If you guys want to... Actually, let's go ahead and let Brendan start the presentation. It's not super long. We mostly wanted to open up the floor to questions that you guys might have about Metasploit and development and kind of things you want to see in the project. But there's us. Dave Maloney was also going to be here, the thelightcosine, but he couldn't make it today. So Brendan has graciously decided to help join the panel. He's a relatively new committer to Metasploit. I think you've been here with us for almost 2 years. Pretty close?
About a year and 2 months.
A year and 2 months.
2 months.
Cool. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so it's not just us. There's a whole lot of people in the Metasploit community. We made this script automatically based on the top committers that went into Metasploit as of this last week. A whole bunch of people, real diverse crew. There might be a couple of duplicates because people like to change their GitHub names occasionally, and so there's a lot more actually than this. Just this is the ones that would fit into the grid nicely. So go on to the next one. Basically what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what's new in Metasploit, what landed over 2017. We're going to talk about some of the cool stuff that we're working on that's you can play with today in pull requests, or that's actually a little bit further over the horizon. And we're going to basically open up the floor for questions. We're going to open up the questions for floor as well. We're going to basically see if what we're doing today really works for you guys, see if there's anything we could be doing better, and of course, what are some of the cool stuff that you want to see in addition to the cool stuff we're going to show you here. Go ahead. So it's really fun working on Metasploit. I think one of the most rewarding things about working on Metasploit is finding all the unusual ways people use it. And not necessarily unusual to you, but there's just a whole lot of features, a lot of different ways that you can do things. In fact, it's kind of sort of a running joke that pretty much anytime we change anything, even if it's fixing a bug, we're going to probably break someone's workflow. And this XKCD kind of illustrates, someone, you fix a CPU overload and it breaks someone's Emacs. So yeah. Talk a little bit about some cool modules that landed this year. You want to talk a little bit about Egypt?
Sure. The struts one is pretty interesting because it was the same. Struts is cool. Turns out you may have heard of it. Judging by the audience reaction you have, there's this company called Equifax. There was the joke, but I guarantee that their stock price is going to be right back in a couple of months.
Totally.
And
time to buy,
yeah,
right?
I guarantee no one is going to give a shit in 6 months because that's how this industry rolls. Yeah. So that struts is fun. Of course, the MS-17010, the Eternal Blue exploit, was super fantastic. This one is still a work in progress even because there's a whole lot more the vulnerability effects that the module still can't target. So that one's being updated all the time. And is-known pipe name was the Samba cry thing. That's a fantastic bug. I love that bug.
We actually added support to modules, the AKA field, so we could include all the cool names that people keep calling for modules, because they're like, I can't find Samba cry. It's like, well, it's actually called a zillion different things. So so now you can actually alias modules to all their silly names that people come up with.
Yeah, so those are extra fun. What is Dynazip log?
Dynazip log. Well, Metasploit doesn't always target the latest and greatest. We tend to also sort of work with the old school stuff too. Brendan, you want to tell us a little bit of a story about how Dynazip log got into the tree?
This is because I'm the new kid, by the way. So when I first started out, I just started grabbing PRs as they appeared on the queue, and I started running through testing and did testing. And I got a little made fun of because I would actually test, document all of the commands I used, document all of the output that was there, explain why it worked or why I didn't necessarily think it worked. And then something hit a queue for Dynazip log decryption. And this was 6 months ago. This is a bug for Windows 98 Plus that was submitted. I had never even known that there was a Windows 98 Plus. I was familiar with Windows 98, Windows 98 SE, and that which will not be named the third edition. But I then went out to eBay and bought several copies of Windows 98 so that I could effectively test this, and then had to track down the Plus pack that you could attach to it. But long story short, I finally put all this stuff together, and you can now get the decryption key from Windows 98 Plus if you ever come across that. But it is in there now.
That's awesome work, Brendan. Some other stuff that's a little bit more new. We've been working on this for a while. For a long time, Metasploit supported only reverse TCP. Didn't have any encryption, so we added SSL encryption on top of reverse TCP for interpreter sessions. Then eventually people were like, well, this gets caught really easily, so we added reverse HTTP, reverse HTTPS. And for a long time, that's all we had. Metasploit sessions typically are tracked by a session, by a network connection that comes in. So if you've ever seen a new session come in, and then you get disconnected, then another session comes in. It might be the same session, but it gets a new session ID. That was due to some fundamental design ways that we had designed Metasploit to track sessions based on connections. Last year, we tried to add another session type, basically named pipes, which is an internal mechanism by which Windows machines can talk to each other, or at least, there's named pipes on Linux too, but this is a different kind of named pipes. This is SMB named pipes. And the idea here being that you might want to actually tunnel interpreter session from one box to another and do it over named pipes. The problem we had was that because Metasploit assumed that every session was an independent connection, you actually had to create a sort of a fake pseudo TCP connection over a tunnel, and then tunnel the named pipe data over that, and it basically became kind of slow, convoluted, and didn't work all that well. Some cool stuff that we did this year was we actually broke that assumption within Framework, at least some areas of Framework, where we don't assume that every individual connection to Metasploit is actually a session, or that every session requires an individual's TCP connection. Once we broke that assumption, that meant that we could now actually support arbitrary payloads coming in and talking over connectionless protocols. Named pipes is one of them. This is something we landed maybe 2 weeks ago. And the idea here is that once you get a foothold within a network, you can actually now pivot from machine to machine directly over named pipes. That's kind of a big deal because you basically are now doing something you would actually expect to see within a Windows network. You're not just doing HTTP connections between boxes, which is going to be kind of an unusual thing unless you're a web developer. But you're actually just using the normal protocols between systems. Another neat thing about this is that actually under the covers, we actually changed the binary protocol by which interpreters talk to Metasploit, and that every single packet, every message is uniquely identified per session. So that means that now we can actually implement things like DNS or ICMP or all kinds of connectionless protocols. About a week ago, I put up an issue saying, hey, we should add DNS next, and it turns out someone already did it. So there's actually a pull request up now for DNS like a week after I put up the issue, because now that the underlying infrastructure is there, you can do it. So look forward to DNS coming up next. So pretty cool stuff. Spencer, you want to talk about Railgun a little bit?
Yeah, I can talk about Railgun for a little bit. So for a long time, Railgun was some functionality that was used in a lot of the post modules for Windows. It's been around for very, very long time, longer than I can really remember. As long as I can really remember using Meterpreter, Railgun was always one of the extensions that allowed you to do a lot of really neat things in post modules on Windows, but it was always only available on Windows. So what Railgun allows you to do is that when you have a session, it allows you to call foreign functions that are actually provided by the native libraries on the system, which is fantastic on Windows because you have that full Windows API so that you can do things. You can load up any one of the libraries like kernel 32, advanced API, things like that, and you can call these functions arbitrarily from Metasploit without having to write any C code yourself and push that up. Well, earlier this year, we actually expanded that functionality out so that it's not just specific to Windows anymore, but you can do it on arbitrary platforms with the current implementation in Python. So that way you can actually have Railgun functionality on Linux and OS X. And then specifically on Linux, one of the models that actually leverages this at this time leverages the GNOME libraries in order to be able to dump out the key ring of the users that are being stored on there. So we're able to actually call the functions through the session that are provided by the native APIs that are already installed. So helping us to sort of live off the land a little bit better.
Some other things that we've added to Metasploit have been around scalability and working better with teams. Something we've actually built this year, and you can actually use it today. We released it, I think, back in March, I want to say, is a thing called Metasploit Aggregator. The idea here is that, so let's say you're in a situation where you've got, you want to basically run a listener remotely. Typically what you do is you'd set up a whole copy of Metasploit Framework, you set up NSF console, maybe run it in a screen session or something like that so you can check on it later, and then you're basically running a full copy of Metasploit in the cloud, and you're waiting for your sessions to come in. But if someone else wants to share those sessions, you can use, of course, the transport command to maybe send it to a different place. But how could you possibly share a session with another user without having to necessarily use screen to multiplex it? Maybe you've got like a real weak VPS, maybe you want to have a real light way of deploying a listener, and just a listener. Something we built this year was this thing called Metasploit Aggregator, and what it does is it sits between Metasploit Framework and your shells. Basically, you can set up this really small, lightweight process that uses maybe like 10 megabytes of RAM to basically be your proxy. It listens for incoming connections. It can actually speak TLV and the lower level interpreter protocol, and it will actually park your sessions for you from any kind of remote endpoint. You can actually have multiple of these things sitting across the internet or wherever you have them. You can then basically connect to them from Framework and see all the sessions, and you can share them, and you can pass them between users, and it never actually moves from the outside point of view. It just shares from within over RPC protocol. This is actually a real cool thing, and I'd love to show you a demo, but we actually broke it semi-intentionally not too long ago, because what we did also added about a month ago was full-level packet encryption. Previously, to actually encrypt interpreter sessions, you had to use HTTPS or you had to use SSL or something like that. Something that's kind of always kind of gotten, I guess, mine and OJ's goat was the fact that we had a whole copy of OpenSSL embedded into interpreter, into the Windows interpreter. And it was kind of an old, janky version as well, but we were using it just because it was small compared to like the newer versions. Something we added this year, and just actually not too long ago, like I said, a couple months ago, was built-in end-to-end packet encryption. So basically means every single message between interpreter is actually independently encrypted, regardless of what the outer transport is. So even if you're using just plain HTTP or plain TCP, or later on with DNS or whatever, all your packets are actually directly encrypted by an interpreter, and it actually does a key exchange with Metasploit Framework. A really cool side effect of this is we no longer actually have to bundle OpenSSL with interpreter. And that means now it's actually 5 times smaller than it used to be. So now rather than being a megabyte to stage it, now it's 200K. So that's a pretty big change. Another nice thing is because of the way that we were doing like SSL encryption, it was awkward to do like in PHP. Now, because of we're just using just sort of direct crypto, we're actually able to implement it on all the interpreters. We haven't done it yet, but we do have PHP support now, which we didn't have before. So that's really cool stuff too. Something else we've been working on, it's slightly controversial, but I don't think it's too bad. Egypt is laughing because he's the controversy. But basically, we wanted to solve a couple of interesting problems. One was, whenever a module runs, it has to be really nice. Metasploit is kind of like an operating system. That's actually what Semper Victus always tells us, is that Metasploit is like an exploitation operating system. And being part of an operating system, basically all your modules, you think of them like processes, they all have to be nice to each other. If a module runs away, it can easily eat all the memory, eat all the sockets, it can kill everything within the system. So the question is, how do we scale, how do we take advantage of more than one CPU? How do we take advantage of more memory? How do we make it so that if a module misbehaves, it can easily be self-contained and killed? So it made us start thinking about how can we actually run modules externally from Metasploit? And then you go, if I can run a module externally from Metasploit, it means I don't necessarily have to write it in Ruby. So we actually landed our first Python module this year using this mechanism, what we call it Project Coldstone, which is named after a gargoyle from the Gargoyles TV show that's made up of a whole bunch of different parts. And the idea here is that we're building a new API for modules so that they can actually talk to Metasploit Framework over an RPC channel rather than just calling direct Ruby libs. We've got our first module pushed up today, and we actually have a PR that just updated today that allows you to do auxiliary scanners as well. One of the neat things about doing auxiliary scanners as an external module is now you can actually use protocols that you maybe don't have support for in Ruby. Our first auxiliary scanner that we're adding as an external one is going to be one that can actually take screenshots of remote desktop protocol systems. So rather than just having to implement remote desktop protocol in Ruby, we could do it in Python or C or Erlang or whatever language you might want. Now there's of course some question about what we'll do for like reviewing Python modules, but when someone submits their first Python module, I'd like to challenge them. It's one of you guys in here to submit your first Python module. I would love to be the first to sort of find out what it's like to review one of those. So anyway, the API is out there. You can check out the latest PR for the auxiliary scanner support as well. We're looking forward to adding a whole lot of cool stuff there too. Something else you might notice that there's a line up there on top that says SOX 5. Another sort of question is if you have an external module, how do you pivot it? I actually gave this talk once before, and only one person ever raised their hand for that they've ever pivoted a module. But in case you ever wanted to pivot it, we're actually implementing a SOX 5 proxy as well that'll run within Metasploit and can actually inject the packets from an external module. Basically, does a like a LD preload, or can do basically a SOX hook for that. So neat stuff there. I want to talk about.
Oh, sure. So, as Brent mentioned, for a lot of things, you need a protocol implemented in Ruby to be able to take advantage of it in Metasploit. So that's the reason for the existence of the Ruby SMB project. Implementing all of SMB 1 and 2 in Ruby so that we can use it directly for Metasploit modules. It's still a work in progress. It's a very large task, but it does a lot already. And this example code here shows you a quick way in, that's like, 30 lines of code-ish, to do a tree connect and list all of the files and loop through them and grab all of the mace attributes of every file in a directory. So it's pretty powerful. It already does a lot of stuff. And this will open the door for a lot more interesting things that you can do with SMB, like named pipes and other sorts of stuff that happens on top of SMB, like DCRPC, and being able to talk to all of those endpoints, like COM endpoints. So you can do things like instantiate an office object on the remote machine and run a macro directly from inside an office object from SMB across the network. So you can have a persistence method that would just be like an office macro that you would normally use in a fish, and you can inject it directly through SMB. So very, very cool stuff. None of that works yet, but now we have the underlying tools to be able to make it work. So we're getting there, and it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, DCRPC is the next thing. And actually, not just offensive security contributors are working on this. We actually have a guy out of France who works at a TV station who's using this to automate their workflow at a TV station. So, pretty neat stuff there. Brendan, you want to talk a little bit about this?
So, as I mentioned before, when I first started, they threw me a bunch of testing, and you've never known excitement until you've taken a PR and tested it against Windows XP, Windows XP 64, Windows 2003, Windows 2003-64, Windows 2008 version 1, Windows 2008 version 2, Windows 2000 version 8. Yeah, you get the point, right? This is not an incredibly exciting thing to do. So I said, well, like most ideas that I live to regret or be proud of later, this started with this could be better. And so I sat down and started writing a testing framework that would automatically launch exploits and payloads directly at machines and then tell me later whether it worked or not so I could get up and have a beer. This started out by sitting and going, okay, I want to do this in Python, and clearly there has to be an awesome Python library that lets me automate things with VMs. I was wrong. I don't know if anybody is familiar with PyVMomi. It's actually a really awesome library that if you want to list all of the snapshots that are on a machine, it takes only 40 lines of code to do it. So the first week I spent basically just encapsulating all of these awesome PyVMomi functions into things like list snapshots and vm.poweron instead of 15 lines of code to turn on a VM. At the end of that, I suddenly realized this is probably something other people want. So we've actually released the VM automation toolset, which is just a Python library where you can connect up to an ESXi server or a VMware instance for Workstation. And so you can automate tasks that you do with Workstation. So you can say, here, this file, upload and run. And that's it. You just hand it the file, it'll automatically upload it, it'll automatically run it. This is how I actually get through and do all of the payload testing through automation. Now I can go ahead and launch this particular attack against 16 different versions of Windows, and I can go downstairs and have a Diet Coke and come back up, and then I have a wonderful grid that says, hey, all of it succeeded or all of it failed, and it ended in tears. So one of the things that I dislike about VM automation is right now, I kind of ran into the problem where there were 13 different standards. Everybody's seen this XKCD? So I decided I didn't like any of the 13 standards because they weren't standard enough, and I wrote the 14th standard. One of the things I would love to see is ESXi will only support some of the PyVMOMI functions if you give them money. Don't blame them for this. It's great. But I would love to start to see this work more and more with free stuff. So part of the attack here is I'm looking for anybody who wants to do Python programming to help support something like VirtualBox so that this could be much more accessible. I mean, ESXi is wonderful and terrific, but it's probably overkill for a lot of people out there. So if anybody's interested in doing that, please help out. It's a public repo. We're looking for stuff. It would be absolutely awesome if you could do vm.poweron on ESXi, on VMware Workstation, on VirtualBox, on KVM. Yeah. So that's one of the things I would challenge anybody that's interested in. The other thing that came about this, you want me to go ahead and talk about Baseline Builder? One of the problems is then I sat down and started building out all of the different machines. This is really exciting, right? I have 96 different machines sitting on an ESX server that I can call up and run. Now, that doesn't help anybody outside my house, frankly. So one of the guys that we work with decided that what he was going to do is leverage existing stuff to just say, I want a Windows 2003 machine. Go build it now. And walk away. Because one of the things we learned in our Metasploitable 3 project, which somebody else will talk about in a minute, is Windows does a wonderful job handing you an ISO and saying you can do this for 90 days. Well, now we've got such great automation through all the DevOps stuff that you can create that VM at basically a click. Configure the whole thing the way you want it. And so in that particular case, you can go ahead, download the ISO, create the VM that you want, have it partitioned or done however you feel like, and automatically have it ready for testing. And that's what this Baseline Builder does. It goes through and will build all of these baseline VMs so that you can go ahead and test against them. And then when they all go bad in 90 days, you can just rebuild them because it's all a script. So that's another project that they're working on. Anybody want to talk about? Oh,
sure. Yeah.
So the Baseline Builder does.
Yeah, it's just a wraparound Vagrant and Packer. Yeah. Metasploitable 3 is also a wraparound Vagrant and Packer. It basically automatically provisions a exploitable machine. I know some people in the past, we actually released this in 2016 towards the end of the year. Some folks had a little bit issues provisioning it. I'll be glad to tell you that we actually have pre-built versions of it now, actually on Vagrant Cloud. So there's no provisioning step required anymore. We've also, there will be a CTF coming up soon. We actually did a trial run of it at Rapid7's United conference, and we had about 100 people running it at once, and auto provisions in S3. So look forward to that. We're going to try to open it up to the world, and we'll see how well it works. All right. So look forward to that. Based on Metasploitable 3, vulnerable VM. Last year we put out Windows 2008 R2. This year we also added an Ubuntu 16.04 VM, which we'll be merging in soon. It has 14 new flags to find, and it's got also a hard and an easy mode. Lots of cool stuff in there. And in fact, you can turn on both VMs at once, and they talk to each other, and you can actually bridge between them. They do file shares and automatic stuff. So you can turn off the flags, yes. One other final thing I guess we'll note is that we're working on a new database model for Metasploit. Last year we asked who uses the database and who doesn't use the database. And I think it was about like 80-20 split, something like that. Well, it's obvious that people don't like setting up SQL databases, at least some folks don't. And sometimes you just don't want your Metasploit storing data. We've heard that from enough people. So what we've done is we've worked on this project. We're basically splitting the database out from Metasploit. This also means that we're going to be splitting some of the active record junk out of Metasploit too, making it smaller and possibly faster. Actually, this makes it 30% faster just splitting the two processes. But the other cool thing about this is actually I have a demo video. Basically Metasploit becomes kind of like a distributed pen testing model. In the same way that Git lets you actually have multiple repos, you can actually have multiple data repos for your data that you collect. And you can actually connect to them remotely. So if two people working on a project, you both can connect to it, and you can disconnect and connect somewhere else. This is actually JSON RPC. Between the two processes. So rather than using Postgres, you could actually write your own implementation. You could actually connect through an adapter to other data sources without actually having to import data to Metasploit at all. So this is actually going to be kind of the model that we move toward, and I think it's going to be really cool. I don't know if we will play the video on your laptop. All right, so before we call it the video, I think we should go ahead and do some Townhall stuff. Yeah, so the whole point of this was to be a town hall. I'm sorry about the 10-minute delay to get the laptop working, but I guess what I'll do is I'll jump out here in the audience and see if anyone has any questions or anything that they like to bring up or talk about.
Do you guys have any plans to port the REST API to regular Metasploit?
What's regular Metasploit? I'm sorry, not pro, he said. Yeah, in fact, everything we talked about here is not pro. This is actually all going to be in base Metasploit.
I can't do a REST API call and say, do I have a session yet? Right.
This will be the REST API that you use for the session. In fact, when we show the video, you'll see that actually it's doing a REST API call to show a session and showing it in a new web GUI. So yeah, definitely. We're adding a REST API that will allow you to check for sessions.
My Alexa can tell me when I have a shell now?
You can do that already. I think Movix has a really cool plugin for doing an RSS feed based on your sessions. And we can also do Twitter. I think we've got a Slack plugin. I think there's like 2 Slack plugins out there. So, yeah. Anyone else?
Asynchronous communications. Are there any plans?
Asynchronous communications, are there any plans for us to add that? Actually, that was one of our, like our 4th big thing that we wanted to work on this year. We actually put out a 2017 roadmap. If you look at our wiki page on Framework, you can see it was the last bullet point. We haven't gotten to it yet, but it's definitely on the roadmap. We'll be working on that next. Are there any other questions? No? Well, I have a couple of cool videos. Oh, well, actually, I think there are some more questions. Here, come on.
So one of the things that I noticed with some other like post-exploitation frameworks, like Empire, for example, today, there's lots of talk about the automation, running multiple modules and stuff like that, kind of trying to automate the process of that a little more. Is that kind of as far as how you would do that with Metasploit, like is that part of the vision to, eventually kind of make it like something that can be scripted and automated, better with like running, for example, one module, like a post module that you want to run against all sessions and then use those sessions to, run, stuff like that. I know there are functionality there available to do that, with resource files and things like that. But I just wanted to kind of, hear your thoughts on kind of that trend towards automation versus like, what is, I guess, Metasploit going to be. So.
Each will take that, but I've got something that Will Vu and I are going to work on right when we get back. We're going to get rid of our hosts versus our hosts. We're going to make everything work with our hosts.
That's big.
But let us do it first.
Yes.
Before you clap too much.
Yeah, so there's
that's what we're doing next because it pisses us off that you can't do it.
Yeah, and it's pissed us off for a very long time. There are some pretty major technical hurdles involved in that. One of the big things is, like, if you're running exploit modules, the various targets could be completely different between hosts, and you have to set your payload before you run the exploit. So if you set a Windows payload and you're targeting a Linux box, obviously that's going to fail. So having our hosts means we need to solve that problem first. As far as other kinds of automation, you mentioned resource scripts. That's one of the best ways to automate the framework right now. And you can run arbitrary Ruby inside a resource file that lets you loop through stuff, inquire from the framework about things that it already knows, so you can do database lookups. And so, for example, if you wanted to run one module against all of your sessions, you just say, hey, framework, show me a list of all the sessions and run this module n times. And that's like say what? Yes, there actually is already a resource module or resource script that does exactly that. It's just run all post, right? Yeah. And it's just resource run all post, and it does exactly that. You can also drop directly into IRB or Pry from inside MSF console and just write raw Ruby directly into the framework right there. And that's one of the big ways that I automate the framework is directly in IRB, and just run loops for whatever I'm trying to accomplish.
When is there going to be a SOX 5 proxy?
There's a repo. I've seen it.
It exists.
I haven't convinced the developer to push it out yet. He's still working on some tweaks, but I've seen it work. So you just have to trust me that it exists. And I haven't given him any other work until that's actually done. So he was actually working on the Coldstone API as well. So yeah, that's part of it. So yeah, just for you. And I've been telling him for the last 2 weeks. All right, Movix is going to ask me about SOX 5. So you better give me an answer. Thanks.
Yeah, one of the difficulties there with SOX 5 is SOX 5 does DNS lookups for you, but it doesn't give you the response. You give it a host name and it does the DNS lookup, and then it sends to the IP address, but it doesn't tell you what that IP address is. So that kind of sucks. But it's the protocol, there's nothing we can do about that. And in the framework, we always do a lookup first to find out which session we should pivot over. So that's the difficulty, and that's why it's taken so long. And I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Nope. All right.
Someone in the back?
Wait.
No, okay.
Every time I turn around. No,
No, there wasn't.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay. You just won the bid. You won the prize. All right. I'm going to walk you through this is Project Goliath. This is our new data model. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit just to make sure we don't run out of time. How are we doing on time?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay, cool. So this is the new data model. Neat thing about it is what it does when you start framework by default, and you don't actually have to set up anything yourself, is it creates a local database instance for each framework. And what you can do is you actually can just connect them together. What this is saying is calling add data service and basically connecting them together over ports. Oops. Let's see if we can kind of fast forward through the boring part here. So basically what we're doing is we're connecting two Metasploit frameworks together. They can just talk to each other straight. So here we've created two hosts and the two frameworks can see the number of hosts. Not too exciting because you can do it with Postgres today. But we'll go ahead and we'll create like a third one on a different host altogether. I'll stop zooming so we can see the output. This terminal in the lower right-hand corner is now connected to basically three Metasploits all talking to each other and sharing data. And now we're going to, for our continuing balancing plates on our fingers, we'll go ahead and connect to a third one that's running in AWS. So this is actually just an externally set up machine. And so now we've got this whole set of hosts that we've found previously, and all the Metasploits are able to see them. And here you can see it's actually connected to three different databases simultaneously, which is pretty cool. So now you can actually store data completely independently of Metasploit. You don't have to even run it on the same machine. Next thing we're going to do is connect a WebSocket GUI to the same data source. And the neat thing about this is because it's using WebSockets and it's using asynchronous callbacks, you never have to refresh. You can just basically keep the page open and it keeps a live view of everything that's happening across all the different Metasploit frameworks that are running simultaneously. So here you can see, you can look at the hosts, and the same host list is right here on this web page. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually get a session. And this is actually
dope.
using a JSON API, so it's REST. It's this is actually a React. This is totally hipster compliant. No Rails here. And we're going to go ahead and get a Python interpreter shell here in a second.
Lovingly handcrafted.
Yeah. The guy who did this isn't a super, doing the up arrow kind of thing, but that's cool. Let's see, and actually there you go. You can see the session just popped right up. So this is going to be kind of the underpinnings of a lot of cool stuff that we're going to be building on top of Metasploit. And I hope that, and actually this is all going to be open source. This isn't going to be part of Pro necessarily. This is going to be something that we put in as a foundational layer, so everyone will be able to make use of it. I've got one other cool demo to show you guys that I
Sharing
think you're going
sessions
to enjoy.
is awesome. This is cool.
Yeah. Let's see. Exit full screen.
The aggregator.
The session went to the aggregator. No. So that's you don't have to use aggregator to do it. So if you don't want to do all this stuff, so the first slide
Well,
which
you do
was
for the
everything
session
we
sharing.
change breaks someone's workflow. What?
Yeah, you do have to use aggregator for the session sharing, though.
Oh yeah, for the sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't care about sharing, you can just keep in your curmudgeonly ways and do it however you like. Yeah.
Yeah.
So something else I'm going to show you here is a kind of a cool project we've been working on, which is solves another annoyance. I actually sat in with Mubix in Egypt on their Metasploit training class, and Will and I sat in the back, and we basically were just watching all the things that people stepped in as like gotchas. And one of the biggest gotchas they got was when we basically tried to run multiple modules simultaneously, and everyone freaked out when background output showed up right over the terminals. Like, wow, what's going on? It keeps typing. So what we've done here, this is a cool proof of concept. We basically now have a split screen Metasploit window where all the background tasks actually show up above all of the command prompts.
Oh, that's cute. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah. We just got this working like yesterday. No. Of course. I'll actually rewind it because it's only like 20 seconds long. Here, you want to do it? Sorry. I'm bogarting the computer. Oh, perfect. So here you can see Metasploit starting up. What this is basically doing is it's running Metasploit inside of tmux, and it creates a split screen, and then it tells Metasploit to basically just write all the background output to a named pipe. And then the upper pane is just reading from that named pipe, almost like just telling a log. So you can now run all your stuff, and all the background passive information shows up on top. But all the messages that have, like, say, an error type output, you'll see here in a second. You type something wrong, and of course it shows up in the bottom where you'd actually expect it to show up. So with this kind of mechanism, you can now interlace the two things and not have them confuse you. We actually tried, Jenny Magius tried this about a year ago, tried to do some terminal emulation hacks, and we broke Windows as a result of that. So this is our new solution, which I think will be really useful. We've got some other demos too. If you want to check out our YouTube channel, we basically post bi-weekly updates on all the cool stuff we have. In fact, the latest update we showed extensions loading on Linux, which we just got working as well. So if you want to sort of follow all the latest Metasploit development, that's a good place to go. You want to go ahead and wrap it up, Ejit?
Yeah, I guess so. Are there any more questions before we call it a day? Yeah.
On the aggregator stuff, obviously your data sharing and stuff, can you actually get or query the states of the other consoles and find out, like, non-data, if you will, non-database anyway?
Oh,
like,
the way...
And can you distribute anything to them, like, I want all three of you to run, or that kind of thing?
I'm not sure I quite understand. So you want to be able to run commands across multiple aggregators?
Well, against all, yeah, you have like five, I don't know exactly why you would do this. I didn't thought that far of it through, but if you had like 5 consoles and you have an aggregator, and I admit I don't grok the entire, setup as it is, but can I say, like, what's the state of this one? Like, what modules, what modules loaded, what modules loaded in that console, like, find out things about that. And
so
say,
aggregators for sharing sessions. So basically you can query which sessions are connected, what their state is, where they're going to. You can also see who's using a session, and you basically steal it from them if you want right now. If you don't want to steal it, you can just be nice and not do that. But you can at least tell who's using which sessions, and if you need to, run a module or whatever, you can connect it to your console and do whatever you want and interact with it, and then release it, put it back on the aggregator, and someone else can use it. So it's basically kind of a time-sharing system for shells.
Okay. Thanks.
Anything else?
The more questions we answer, the more questions you get.
So with the aggregator, can you watch and not interact with the
You can
session?
watch. You can basically just passively watch sessions come in. Think of it like a shell trot line. You can basically just have it laying out there, and then you can go and check it and see what you caught, and then you can go row back to shore. Yeah, you can see who's interacting too. There's actually, if you go to Metasploit aggregator on the Rapid7/Metasploit aggregator on GitHub, we've got all the information on how it works. Like I said, we just broke it, but it should be fixed soon.
When's DB Autopwn coming back?
When's DB Autopwn coming back?
Trollololol.
I'm surprised it took that long to get that question.
I'm not surprised about who it came from. No, the answer is no. Anybody else?
Well, we're going to be here all weekend, guys. So if you have a question for any of us, feel free to catch us. If you want to hack on Metasploit or learn kind of how some of the new features work, we're also glad to help you there too. Oh, my name's again.
I'm Egypt. On Twitter, I am EGYP7.
Yeah, I'm Buster B on GitHub. I'm Buster B Cook on Twitter because someone else took Buster B.
I'm Brendan. If on the Twitter, I am Tico's Moose, Tico's_Moose.
I am ZeroSteiner on GitHub, Twitter.
So, thank you everyone for coming. Please feel free to hit us up on Twitter or email or just run into us at the con. Please ask us questions. We'd love to help you.
Or on Slack soon as well. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, sir. All right. I don't know what to do. The top secret.
That's why I give it to you.